Hey, Alexa.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start off with a extra brief today guided meditation, if that works for you. All right, I'll try to contain myself to like a few minutes. So it'll be especially good for me because I'm a little frenzied from programming meetings. So let's just begin by finding a comfortable position. I think we're both sitting, if that's good. And then you can have your eyes open or closed, whatever feels right. And then let's take a few breaths together, breathing in and out. And out. And out. Continuing to breathe at a pace that feels right for you. But anchoring your awareness to the inside of your nostrils. Just noticing the sensations of the air. Now is not the time for planning or solving problems. Just relax and notice what's going on. As tension arises in the body, feel free to move if that's what the body's asking for, or just say okay and let it fall away. Still anchored to the breath, I want to spend about 30 seconds just adding words in our mind to connect with what's happening. Staying anchored and describing this experience. Are there sensations of cold, hot? Is there agency? Do you feel like you're having to pull in air? Are other sensations always present? And just notice and describe them. then let this internal conversation, this description fall away, but continue that awareness. Just feeling and experiencing. If our mind wanders, just bring it back. Allowing the relaxation to become deeper. And lastly, or near lastly, just connect to appreciate something about this moment. How are your needs being served by what's going on? And just connect with that in whatever way feels right. If sensations come up, just notice them without labels. One last breath in together, breathing in and out. And when it feels right, I invite you to come back to this space, open your eyes if they're closed, and share anything that feels right that came up or that you're feeling now.
Sorry about that. My computer logged me out. Yeah, no, I'm feeling great. I'm honestly feeling ready to have this conversation, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. We had a short discussion at the last podcast about the meditation putting the computer to sleep. So it sounds like that happened this time too.
Yeah, quite literally.
Yeah, I'm becoming the computer whisperer. I guess I can start. If you'd like to introduce yourself in whatever way feels right.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Alexa Gillis. I'm a relationship counselor and coach, and I've been working with both individuals and couples for nearly a decade now. I love working with couples who are in sort of the first years of their relationship, who are still sort of building that strong foundation and helping them break the cycle of conflict, communicate with ease, and find sort of the tools and skills they need to be able to maintain a strong future together.
Thank you for that. Well, immediately I become curious about what interests you about working with couples in their first year.
I love the question because it's something I enjoy talking about. So because I've been doing this for a while now, I've sort of had the luxury of working with a range of couples. And I find that when couples come in sort of sooner rather than later, they have the best chance of success. So on average, couples will wait 6 to 7 years before they seek out any kind of professional support. by which point one or both partners may already have one foot out the door. Or their problems will be more deeply entrenched. And so it becomes a lot harder to work through things at that point than when couples seek support early on, still sort of love each other, still feel motivated to work on things, and are sort of catching those things before they become really big.
So my interpretation is that there are different stages. And and I'm going to ask you about that. Within the first year, you often get them at a still moldable stage where with your experience and knowledge, you have the potential to tap in and shift it to create a greater likelihood of success for their relationship.
Yes, exactly.
And so, yeah, I'm curious about, well, what stages do you often see with your clients? And yeah, what do they look like?
So there are 5 stages, and they can be called a few different things. I think the ones that people most commonly know or think about are the honeymoon stage. So I don't often get couples in the honeymoon stage because everything is sort of great, everything is rosy at that point, and so they're not usually at a point where they're seeking support.
Have you ever had someone like in the honeymoon stage and they're like, well, we just want to make sure we're we're aligned to the criteria?
Yeah, I've actually had a few of those more so recently. I think people are sort of changing now and seeing couples counseling or couples coaching as less of something you do when you're in crisis and as more of a preventative measure. But for the most part, I tend to get couples who are already noticing some issues. They're maybe not fighting a whole ton, but noticing patterns in their conflict and want to get support to move out of those repetitive conflict cycles.
So we've got the honeymoon stage and then really the non-honeymoon stage with all these problems. Is Do you have any categorization for the other ones?
So I would call that the power struggle stage, and it's basically a make or break stage. So a lot of couples will break up once they get to the power struggle stage if they don't know how to effectively move out of it. Because what you'll see is they will either sort of fight and get to the point where they feel like they have irreconcilable differences and break up, or they will, let me think of how to word this, stay together but feel like they've settled. So they may not break up, but they'll feel like they're roommates more so than lovers.
So they're discontent, that chemistry starts to fade, maybe the joy of it.
They'll start to feel like if they stay together and they're not necessarily having a ton of conflict, but they're avoiding conflict, they'll maybe get along or be able to work well as roommates, but they will lose that spark and sense of deep connection.
So I'm trying to understand clear indicators of the power struggle stage. Because I imagine like a lot of people have conflict, but it's either how much conflict or the ability to resolve conflict.
Yeah. So your question is, what are some indicators that you might be in that stage?
Or examples. Yeah. So I guess to help vivify what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, let me think about that for a second, but essentially it can look a few different ways. So you'll either have couples who are in a push-pull dynamic where one person will want to sort of talk through things right away, and the other person will want to sort of avoid those conversations and sort of stop that as quickly as possible. And so that's sort of a cycle that you commonly see with heterosexual couples, with women wanting to talk through things and men wanting to avoid conversation. Again, I'm not saying that applies to all men and women, but it's something that we tend to see in heterosexual couples. The other way it can look is two couples who avoid. So they will maybe tell you that they never fight, and that's not always a good thing, because if you're not fighting, it usually means you're not talking about things. And so that's where that sense of connection or initial spark can start to fade away.
So the push pull and the avoid. I wrote avoidant and the push pull dynamic. In the push pull, women want to discuss things. This is often the case in with your clients, and men, I kind of want to say avoiding it. So it's like we either have one avoider or we have two avoiders.
Yes. And then we can also have two pursuers. So that's two people who sort of want to talk through things when they're still heated. And so that can look quite confrontational or spicy. I don't know what you want to call it. But that's where you have two people sort of trying to get their point across when they are in fight mode.
Two pursuers, but in fight mode. So I'm curious about what your process is for each of these three that you've mentioned. So yeah, like if that sounds interesting to you, starting with the push-pull dynamic. People come to you and the woman's like, I always want to talk about it. And he says, you're too emotional, or he goes like, I'm playing video games. Like what do you do at that point?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think with all of those presentations, the process is essentially the same, which is to sort of identify the fight cycle. So, what are our patterns here? How do we get into things? What are the things that we each do that causes those fights to spiral? So, getting clear on sort of each person's triggers as well as how they trigger the other. So, that would be sort of the starting point. And then it's really a matter of figuring out what you need to do instead, right? So if you've identified that, I'm going to make something up here, your partner raising their voice is one of your triggers, and what you do in response is shut down, then we want to look at what you can do differently that's going to lead to more productive conversations.
Let's say, making an example up, that every time my partner wanted to talk about something that bothered her, I immediately said, not now, and went to play video games. And then we went to you. So you would you would start by saying, we need to look at and understand my triggers, or I guess
So I would want to look at the whole dynamic, right? Because it's never just one person's fault. It always takes two to tango. So I would want to help you and your partner in this example understand how you get into things and what it is that causes you to shut down, right? So what is your partner doing that may be contributing to that? And that's not to say it's their fault, but oftentimes the other person's behaviors can be quite triggering.
I'm letting that sit in.
Let me know if you need me to clarify anything. So something I might ask is, tell me more about what makes you want to go and play video games whenever your partner tells you there's something they want to talk about, right? But what about that is triggering to you? So is it their tone where you're already sort of assuming that they have a problem and are going to criticize you? Is it something else? Is it because you feel really uncomfortable with those kinds of conversations? So I would really want to go a little deeper with that to help the partner understand what causes them to shut down.
So you offer, we'll say the male in this case, some empathy and understanding. Is it often difficult to even get that? Because I imagine like maybe he's even shutting down in these instances. Is it difficult what problems arise? What's your experience often like in these events?
When I'm trying to get the partner who's shut down to open up? Yeah, that's a great question, actually. It depends. Some people are more self-aware than others. So some partners will be able to sort of quickly say, hey, this is what happens for me. Maybe they don't go into a ton of detail, but they can identify it. whereas others may have a harder time understanding where that trigger comes from. And it almost always goes all the way back to sort of family of origin stuff. So to our experience growing up in our you call it in our childhood home, or in our in our childhood home. Let's go with that.
So it makes me think therapy. So you ask them these questions and it lets them open up. They feel safe, and very often it brings back memories from whatever happened in their childhood.
Sometimes it can bring up memories. Other times I'll sort of prompt them to go there if I think it would be useful, because if that person can understand, oh, okay, this is where the trigger comes from. It's not just my partner who is triggering me, but there's a story there, there's an injury or a wound, then that can actually help them avoid sort of blaming or pointing the finger, and it can help their partner have more empathy and understanding towards them.
So there's more empathy and understanding created in this 3-person event. And are there like recommendations or exercises you give for next time?
Yeah, for sure. So once they have sort of that initial understanding, there's more empathy, there's more self-awareness, then we want to look at, okay, what do you do with those triggers, right? Because it's one thing to know that you're triggered, it's another to know how to manage them. So that would be sort of the next step, is giving them ways to sort of catch themselves when they're triggered and take sort of pause or time out, and then use that time to regulate or get back into their window of tolerance.
So I guess concretely, and I'm trying to think of like in my own life,
Mm-hmm.
I notice just immediately what will come up in me is like an aversion. I want there to be a separation. You need to leave, or I need to go away. And
Yeah.
that's where like consciously in recent times, that's what I sense. And so in this situation, I notice that. And what would you recommend for me in that case?
So a break or time out is probably what I would recommend, because if you're wanting to shut down or get away from the conversation, it means that you are in flight mode, right? So you are not in a place where you are going to be able to have a productive conversation. Because when we go into fight or flight, logic goes out the door and we lose the ability to problem solve, to empathize, and to think through problems in a clear and concrete way.
So being able to distinguish flight mode. So what comes to me is like, well, how do you distinguish? And in that example, when I want that distance, I can see that's very clearly. But for other people in their avoidant tendency, like
Yeah.
I guess where do they discover, draw the line, and even create more space so that that flight mode is further and further away?
So are you asking what are some other indicators or cues if it's not obvious to someone that they are shutting down or going into flight mode?
What am I asking? I think I'm asking multiple questions. One is yes. What are the indicators, and at what point do we go and recognize, like, hey, I'm no longer in a position to offer empathy to myself or anyone else, and
Yeah.
this conversation is not going to be very productive, and I need to take some distance.
So that's why it's so helpful to sort of go through the fight cycle first, and sort of map out what are the things that come up for you. So usually there will be certain behaviors, negative thoughts, feelings, physical sensation. Those can vary, but I think in general, indications that you're in flight mode are wanting to shut down, maybe talking, but talking less, having a slower time responding, feeling defensive. There might be physical sensations as well. So anything like that that tells you, hey, I'm not enjoying this conversation, is probably a sign that it would be a good time to take a break and just sort of check yourself out.
So then I think, okay, well, you may be able to notice that about yourself, and it's probably a useful skill to notice that about your partner, whether
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
having a conversation and also just visually or any other sense, just noticing, okay, when have they lost empathy?
Yeah, or when, I think more simply, when do I feel they're not listening, right? If you feel you're not being heard or that your partner isn't listening, that's a pretty clear sign that one of you is shutting down or is getting defensive and listening to defend.
I think I had at least two questions. I feel one, and it's like, what happens when you have a partner that pathway to that space is minimal, or that they're just not great at being empathetic?
Hmm. I'll answer the latter. So what can you do if your partner is not very empathetic? Usually when partners lack empathy, unless they have narcissistic tendencies, it's because there's something that's coming up for them that's getting in the way of them sort of being able to understand or empathize with you, right? So there's some sort of block. And it happens a lot, actually. It happens a lot when we look at sort of the fight cycle and then the patterns that typically show up in that. So I would want to understand what gets in the way of them having empathy. And they would probably say something like, well, it's hard for me to have empathy for my partner when I don't feel understood, right? Or when I've told them something, I don't know how many times, and they're still sort of doing the thing that I've asked them not to do.
I think about, what do you do then when there's a very strong, or what do you recommend for your clients when there's a very strong, seemingly unending need for empathy, where you can't get your needs met, you can't get understood because they're not at a place to
Mhm.
hear you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it speaks directly about the fight cycle. The reason that they don't feel understood is because their needs aren't getting met. Oftentimes, when couples fight, it's not about the thing that started the fight, like the dishes or somebody leaving their shoes out. It's about not feeling heard and understood. And oftentimes, it's because they have opposing needs. So, for one person, it might be space, whereas for the other person, it's being able to talk things out and feel validated.
So it might be that you can't meet their needs in that moment and you're just not going to get heard.
I The way I sort of think of that is we have two opposing needs, right? Let's go with the pursuer distancer example. One person needs space, the other one needs to talk things out and feel heard. How do we work together so that you both get what you need, right? And so maybe it's taking a pause so that the person who's feeling shut down gets that and is able to take some time to regroup and recenter. But letting the person who needs to talk know that once they feel calm, they will come back to the conversation, right? And then having that conversation calmly so that the other person is also getting what they want or need.
I think I want to clarify. Like, I've had conversations where the person I'm speaking to responds in a defensive manner, regardless of my attempt to make them feel heard or to meet their needs. And sometimes I'm not sure this best strategy, or if there is a strategy that's possible to have their needs met so that I get heard for the needs that I'm missing.
Mm.
And that's perhaps what I'm asking about is, it in these situations, have you found clients in these situations, and what is a potential solution or strategy in those situations?
Yeah. So are you talking about clients who are very defensive and not necessarily open to looking inwards or understanding what's coming up for them?
That's definitely an example, but not necessarily restricted
Mhm.
to that.
What can you maybe give me an example just so that I'm
Oh,
clear?
that's a perfect example.
Okay.
Like, I'm fine with that example.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
just saying, like, it can be more broad than that.
So what do you do when someone is really resistant? Oh, sorry, it lagged a little bit there. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And I think in those cases, I would recommend couples counseling because if you're having a hard time getting past that resistance, then chances are seeking professional help is going to be your best bet because then you have a trained neutral professional there to help facilitate conversations and work with the person who is resistant to try and break down some of it. But almost always, when resistance shows up, it's because there's sort of hurt there that the person is consciously or unconsciously trying to protect themselves from. So that takes specialized training to do, which is why something like couples therapy can be very beneficial for those cases.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, have you stumbled upon someone and it just takes years, or like what's the average duration you see that there's a blockage, and how long does it take to
Yeah,
chisel that down?
totally. There's no set period of time, but it kind of goes back to what we started with why I love working with couples who are in the earlier stages or in the first few years, because when couples come in and one or both partners are resistant, it can take months or years to work through. And it doesn't always work, to be honest. Sometimes they're too far gone, or maybe they come in and learn sort of what they would need to do in order to change their dynamic and say, you know what? I don't want to be bothered. It's too much. I don't have the motivation.
Can you tell someone or some couple is too far gone, but like very quickly or within a session? You just know it's not going to work out.
I don't think I would ever say that because it's not my choice, it's theirs. I think that would be pretty unethical. But what I would do is sort of point out what I'm seeing. I might let them know what my concerns are and help them come to that decision themselves.
It makes me think of Gottman and the research there.
Mm,
But I want to ask instead about you. You talked about narcissism, so about people not getting their needs met, not
mm.
being able to hear someone's needs, and you said there's usually a block, and I think, and I could be misquoting you, unless there's narcissism. So, like, I guess I want to unpack that and explore why you said that, if I'm remembering you correctly.
For sure. I just want to sort of give you a heads up about time. So maybe wrapping up in the next 10, 15 minutes. So with narcissism, people who have narcissism don't have the ability to empathize. And so it's very hard to be in relationship with a narcissist because they're, first of all, there's sort of an imbalance in those relationships, but also because narcissists don't want to change, right? It's all about what's going to benefit them. And they typically will sort of use people as a way to elevate themselves. So they're not interested in changing, right? Unless, it's going to be beneficial to them in some way or other. So those are really tough sort of couples or individuals to work with. And more often than not, I will sort of work with the partner who is with a narcissist. And then, oh, sorry about that. More often than not, I'll work with sort of the partner who is dating or married to a narcissist and help them understand sort of the kind of relationship that they're in.
So, what is your advice? Is it like, hey, you're probably not going to get a lot of empathy and not get your needs met. Please consider this. Don't ask them to change.
Honestly, I would show them something called the power and control wheel and have them go through it with me and let me know what about it resonates. And usually that's pretty eye-opening for them or they'll be able to tell me, you know what, I see a lot of that in my relationship. I often feel gaslit. I feel sort of minimized. I don't have access to finances, things like that. And so that's more along the lines of how I would approach it, where I would educate them. I would sort of help work with them to understand if that is a fit for them or not, and then support them in getting out of that relationship if they're in a place where they're ready to do that.
I guess the question that comes is like, who should be in a relationship with a narcissist? Like
No
what
one.
type what type of
No
person?
one. Maybe another narcissist.
Yeah.
And again, there's a spectrum when it comes to narcissism. So some people can have some narcissistic traits and then still be okay in relationships. But a true narcissist is probably the hardest person to be in relationship with.
Can we look at their desire to manipulate, their desire to not change as an unmet need as well, and like put that under that structure? Or is it deeper than that?
I'd say it's deeper. Like with narcissism, it comes from a wound. There's usually a lot of insecurity, but it's very hard to reach. And so I think it would be hard to do because they would need to be motivated to look inwards. And in my experience, a lot of the times they aren't.
So a major factor is willingness to change. If people aren't willing to
It's
change.
everything. I'd say that is the most important predictor of whether your relationship is going to be healthy and successful or not.
Do you think you could have your clients come in and do like a silly exercise, almost like the hokey pokey, and like be like, all right, now you have to raise your hand, now you have to do this, and get them to do things that are like reasonable but uncomfortable, and see if they're willing to do that? Is there such
A willingness test.
yeah,
I don't know of one, but I love the idea of it.
yeah. New dating app idea. Everyone gets a willingness test.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes people will say they're willing and then turns out that they aren't. So I think the true test is, do they show up and do the work year after year? When you tell your partner something they're doing or not doing bothers you, do they listen and actively take steps to try and improve that?
And there's also a difference between them agreeing and wanting to, and then not being able to follow through.
And someone that is truly willing will look at that and say, hey, I want to do this, but I'm having a hard time with it, and sort of go the extra mile to do whatever is needed to be able to shift that.
Well, thank you. I wanted to give you a moment to express anything you wanted to our audience.
No, this was great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the conversation. I love where it went. I really enjoy talking about the fight cycle and my process when working with couples. In terms of what I want to say, I'm not I'm not too sure. I think if the conversation interested you, or if you are curious in how you can work with me or want to sort of be in touch, then I would encourage you to reach out to me on Instagram, and I'll share my handle with you, David, so that you can put that on the show notes. Like you, David, I also have a new podcast. Funnily enough, we both launched around the same time. So my podcast is for couples. It's called Built to Love, and I talk a lot about sort of the necessary skills and tools that couples need to have a happy and lasting relationship. So that would be sort of a great place to go if you're curious to learn more.
Awesome. And we can put those links in the descriptions.
Yeah.
I want to express some appreciation for being on here, taking the time out of your day, and answering a lot of my questions. I found it really enjoyable to be able to pick your brain and explore. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. You had amazing questions.
Awesome. Well, Alexa, thank you. Until next time.
Yes, thanks so much.